We have Beth Turcotte, Wendy Mortimer, David Guyton, Nancy Hale, and David Marden.
And David Guyton.
My favorite novelist once recounted a story about observing a Cantonese man sitting on a Kowloon footpath reading a book. The man's face was stern with concentration, his finger tracing the line being read. At times, the man's expression would screw up in frustration at his progress. Finally, the reader looked up at the sky, his face beaming. Whether from a sudden joyous jolt with the act of reading, or revelation from what was written, or delight at how the story resolved, it doesn't matter. What mattered is he was in possession of something deliciously private, a connection between him and the writer, between the real world and that world inscribed upon the pages. What would the world be like without books? The latest findings from the National Literacy Trust shows that 1/3 of all children, nearly 4 million, do not own a single book. Yet, all across the United States, large and small cities are closing public libraries. And with roads and streets left in disrepair, teachers, policemen, and firemen being laid off, and politicians in both parties pledging never to raise taxes, no matter what happens to our quality of life, the outlook is bleak. The greatest nation on earth, as we still call ourselves, no longer has the political will to arrest its visible and precipitous decline and save the institutions on which the workings of our democracy depend. I don't know anything more disheartening than the sight of a shut-down library. Like many other Americans of my generation, I owe much of my knowledge to thousands of books I withdrew from public libraries over a lifetime. I remember the sense of awe I felt as a teenager when I realized I could roam among the shelves, take down any book I wanted, examine it at my leisure at one of the library tables, and, if struck my fancy, bring it home. Not just some thriller or serious novel, but also big art books and everything from C.S. Lewis to Lewis Carroll.
Alice was beginning to get very tired of sitting by her sister on the bank and of having nothing to do. Once or twice she had peeked into a book her sister was reading, but it had no pictures or conversations in it. And what is the use of a book, thought Alice, without pictures or conversation? So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies. When suddenly, a white rabbit with pink eyes came running past her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that, nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, "Oh dear, I shall be late."
Oh dear.
When she thought it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it all seemed quite natural. But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and fortunately was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole behind the hedge.
In Oak Park, Illinois, when I was in high school, I went to the library 2 or 3 times a week, though in my schooling I was a middling student. Even in wintertime, I'd walk the dozen blocks to the library.
A Christmas frost had come at midsummer. A white December storm had whirled over June.
Often in rain or snow, carrying a load of books and records to return.
Ice glazed the ripe apples.
Trembling with excitement and anticipation of all the tantalizing books that awaited me there. The kindness of the librarians, who, of course, all knew me well, was also an inducement. They were happy to see me read so many books, though I'm sure they must have wondered in private about my vast and mystifying range of interests.
Drifts crushed the blowing roses. On hayfield and cornfield lay a frozen shroud. Lanes which last night blushed full of flowers today were pathless with untrodden snow, and the woods, which 12 hours since waved leafy and fragrant as groves between the tropics, now spread, waste wild and white as pine forests in wintry Norway.
I check out at the same time, for instance, a scholarly book about North American insects and bugs, a Louis Ferdinand Céline novel, the poems of Hart Crane, an anthology of American short stories, a book about astronomy, and recordings by Bix Beiderbecke and Sidney Beckett. My favorite, of course, was
Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift.
This was only the start.
I lay down on the grass, which was very short and soft, where I slept sounder than I ever remember to have done in my life. And as I reckoned, about 9 hours, for when I awaked it was just daylight. I attempted to rise, but was not able to stir, for as I happened to lie on my back, I found my arms and legs were strongly fastened on each side to the ground, and my hair, which was long and thick, tied down in the same manner. I likewise felt several slender ligatures across my body from my armpits to my thighs. I could only look upwards. The sun began to grow hot, and the light offended my eyes. I heard a confused noise about me, but in the posture I lay could see nothing except the sky. In little time, I felt something alive moving on my left leg, which, advancing gently forward over my breast, came almost up to my chin. When bending my eyes downwards as much as I could, I perceived it to be a human creature, not 6 inches high, with a bow and arrow in his hands, and a quiver at his back.
Over the years, I thoroughly explored many libraries, big and small, discovering numerous writers and individual books I never knew existed, a number of which are completely unknown, forgotten, and still very much worth reading. No class I attended at the university could ever match that. Even libraries in overseas army bases and in small, impoverished factory towns in New England had their treasures like long, out-of-print works of avant-garde literature and hard-boiled detective stories of near genius. Whenever I found a library, I immediately felt at home.
She clapped the heels of her shoes together 3 times, saying, "Take me home to Aunt Em."
Empty or full, it pleased me just as much.
Instantly, she was whirling through the air, so swiftly that all she could see or feel was the wind whistling past her ears.
I saw a boy and a girl doing their homework and flirting, an old woman in obvious need of a pair of glasses squinting at a dog-eared issue of the New Yorker, a prematurely gray-haired man writing furiously on a yellow pad surrounded by notes and open books that had kinds of graphs in them, and, the oddest among the lot, an elderly balding man in an elegant blue pinstripe suit with a carefully tied red bow tie, holding up and perusing a slim, antique-looking volume with black covers that could have been poetry, a religious tract, or even something having to do with the occult. It's the certainty that such mysteries lie in wait beyond its doors that still draws me to every library I come across. When I was a boy with thick glasses and braces on my buck teeth, books were my safe haven. Generations have likewise found solace in the written word, safety and feeling less alone amongst the crowds. Aren't we the loneliest after all when we're surrounded by others? But books aren't bomb shelters, they're bridges. Through their pages, we're brought out into society, and one can guess that someone who reads is prepared for the world on a deeper level than someone who doesn't. Though reading a book connects one with humanity, it is also the last truly private act in a world that's becoming too public. As nourishment for the mind, it's slow food in a world given over to fast food. Blogs, text messages, ebooks, and the like bring topicality, portability, instant gratification, much as newspapers and magazines do. And there are the unquantifiable pleasures that books alone offer. The scent, the sound, the tactile sensation of what is a cerebral, silent, disembodied task. The sharing of a volume by lending it to a friend. The adventure of leaving a book to be found by a stranger who will in turn partake in that private journey before passing it on again. The grandeur of a civilization evidenced through its libraries.
Lastly, she pictured to herself how this same little sister of hers would, in the aftertime, be herself a grown woman, and how she would keep, through all her riper years, the simple and loving heart of her childhood.
It is important that we work to give every person the opportunity to enjoy books as shelters, sustenance, and roads forward.
And how she would gather about her other little children and make their eyes bright and eager with many a strange tale, perhaps even with the dream of Wonderland of long ago.
To imagine a world without books is to imagine a world without thought.
And how she would feel with all their simple sorrows, and find pleasure in all their simple joys, remembering her own child life and the happy summer days.
A world without feeling, compassion, history, or voice. The end.
The end.
Thank you.